Dr. Greg, where psychology meets everyday life. I'm Dr. Greg. I'm a psychologist, and I'm here with producer Brian Gomez.
Happy Monday, you guys.
We have Gus on the board. Hi, Gus.
Hello.
And we have a very, very special guest today. We're going to be talking about money. Our special guest is former CPA, certified coach, CEO of Limit Free Life, as well as the host of the Money and You podcast with Michelle Perkins. It's Michelle Perkins. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Dr. Greg.
So good to see you. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about money because money is a generalized conditioned reinforcer, meaning money stands for everything else. So money can stand for goods and services, but it can also stand for our values, things like freedom and security. So we're going to be trying to understand money with a genuine money expert, of which I am not, so I'm glad to have an expert in the room with me. And we're going to be trying to understand it and how it impacts our lives. So we're really glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I just want to say that you were also on my show, and That was a huge treat. So thank you so much.
That was pure pleasure. So thank you. That was really wonderful. So please turning to Michelle's show, that's the Money and You podcast with Michelle Perkins. We were commenting that Michelle Perkins was the same as Ann Perkins from Parks and Recreation. But different first name.
Different, yeah.
Okay, there you go. So today on Off the Couch, will there be any money for Gen Z? This is something I was concerned about after looking at some of the research. We're going to talk about this week in psychology, teenagers' mental health issues that come up when their parents have money problems. The peer pressure, susceptibility that lasts into adulthood, leading to pretty bad money decisions once in a while. And would you rather work somewhere you love or have more flexibility? Research solves that one. And in the news, we're going to talk about late-stage millennials, the microgeneration using massive economic resources. Brian is a late-stage millennial. Thank you, Brian. And I think I'm just going to try to referee between the two of you because this is a real issue that's coming up, and I think it's going to be very important for us to talk about because a bubble generation is coming up that's going to be eating up a lot of the resources, and I think creating a little problem for Gen Z to follow. So this will be an interesting one.
Yeah.
Okay, so teenagers' mental health issues when their parents are having money. Researchers from the University of Pittsburgh and one from the University of Houston, which is my alma mater, for my PhD, but they studied more than 100 Pittsburgh area teenagers and their parents. They looked at family income, views about their financial challenges, and their mental health. So they looked at both the teenagers and their parents, and they viewed both things. They also checked in multiple times over a 9-month period. So this is what we call a longitudinal study. They looked at it over time, and they published this study in Developmental and Psychopathology. The results were kind of interesting and maybe not so surprising, but previous studies really kind of looked at slice and time. And that's what we often do. We take a survey, we kind of see where someone is. And so you'll kind of see, these people are having money problems, these people aren't. But what they wanted to do is to see how do economic situations vary over time. And of course, I think we were talking on your podcast that situations don't always remain static. Mm-hmm. So that's a really interesting thing. They also wanted to look at when teenagers reported that they and their families were experiencing financial hardship, and maybe the kids couldn't afford school supplies, they didn't have money for necessities, they couldn't go out after school for an activity or something like that. And in the months that the teens felt these hardships, they actually found something really interesting. They found that in the months that the teens felt the hardships, the teens had more behavioral problems. They were more likely to be depressed and get in trouble at school.
Interesting.
So, I don't know if you encountered this in your type of work, but I had to really kind of wonder, Michelle, when you're working with someone who has children, how do you handle it? Like when they're having financial issues, how do they communicate it to their children?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question because honestly, the question that first comes to mind is, do you share it with your children?
Mm-hmm.
They can feel it. They know it. I mean, kids know way more than you tell them when you're in the house together. So there's definitely, I think it's important to assume that they can feel your anxiety or your stress or your worries and address those worries. And I guess you have to do that within yourself. You have to figure it out for yourself a little bit and have a plan. And then I think letting kids know that there is a plan is helpful because they, as we all know, their imaginations are pretty active. And so a lot of times they're assuming some pretty terrible things going on. And they may not ask. I don't know that kids really ask. They want to protect their parents more than they want to burden them or make them upset, and so they might just come to their own conclusions. And but I do think money can be a big stress on kids, and if they see their parents being stressed out, they will react. And I think it's important to address it without getting necessarily into the details of what's going on because they just may not understand that. But
I have to say that that's really honestly quite brilliant to say. You address it, but you also have a plan, and it sounds like you're just kind of, here's what it is in vague terms. We don't need to go into the specifics because that the problem with going into specifics is then the kid will start trying to problem solve, like, oh, you need $200? Well, let me go,
That's exactly,
see how I can earn $200. But instead, just to say, look, I'm having a little issue right now, but here's the plan to remedy. So it takes it right out of their lap, and it does give them some hope. So that's really good.
Yeah, I think, that's would be my suggestion. I was just thinking something else as you've made a comment that made me think, but now I'm forgetting it. Hopefully it will come back.
Oh, it will come back. You can interrupt me at any time, but that happens to me all the time. You guys can attest to that. Okay, let's talk about peer pressure. Peer pressure that lasts into adulthood. Peer pressure is kind of an interesting thing. We all are subject to it. And living here in LA, I think we're very much subject to it. Peer pressure is often linked to children and teenagers. We often think the only people that suffer peer pressure are children and teenagers. That's true. Didn't you want to fit in school? I did. Yeah. And when you'd have to buy our clothes at JCPenney and the other kids came in actual name brand Levi's, and I was like, oh, they can afford Levi's. So that's all I buy. Because those scars don't go away. But it's very funny about that kind of peer pressure and how it works. Mm-hmm. But there was a study done at the University of Texas at Dallas, and they wondered if adults succumb to peer pressures too in everyday situations. What do you guys think?
Well, I feel like by the fact that we all have iPhones and we are constantly getting new ones, we're falling under the big peer pressure.
Yeah, that's a great example, actually. But I think adults don't succumb to some peer pressure. But with money, I would say absolutely. Right? It goes all the way back to the keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. And the neighbor just got a new car. And, so I definitely think when it comes to money, there is a lot of that. And then there's also the people who have kind of declared that I'm not going to succumb to it. I'm going to live in a small house and drive the old car because I want to and because I like that simpler lifestyle. So it is, if you're conscious enough about it, and that's the decision you want to make. But I think if you're not super conscious about what you're doing, you might just fall into that,
Well, I think both of you are right. And that's what the study says. So let's talk about it. We examined the battle between self-control and peer pressure. This was in a study published in Psychology and Aging. Yes, it's true. They have a a journal for aging in psychology. This previous studies just looked at adolescents with peer pressure. You know, sometimes psychology can get like overwrought in a particular area. And when we talk about peer pressure, we want to know what the teens are doing. You know, what are they all doing? Like, what are they all looking at? They're all looking at TikTok. Oh my God, we've all got to know what TikTok, whatever. So they looked at things like that. They looked at things like binge drinking, unprotected sex, drug experimentation, any kind of impulsive spending. I looked at Brian. And the study looked at more mundane urges. In this particular study, that's what was kind of cool about it. Like having a glass of wine when perhaps you're trying to resist having alcohol, or checking your social media when you're in front of a friend, or maybe when you're at a dinner and someone gets up to use the restroom. You know, can you resist that urge? Well, the typical dilemma is like having a piece of chocolate cake at a niece's birthday party if I'm trying to lose weight, or shall I grab an expensive latte? Is there an inexpensive latte? Shall I grab an expensive latte with my coworkers if I'm trying to save money? So all of these things play a role in how we live our lives, and it can, of course, cause weight gain. It can derail us in our goals, but boy, can it cause money problems, can it? That is quite literally the nickel and dime us to death theory.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm just thinking about it. I need to stop doing that.
Well, bear with me. The study will help a little bit, I'm hoping. The previous belief was that peer pressure peaks during adolescence and gradually disappears into early adulthood, and that middle-aged and older adults were thought to be better at controlling their desires. They're better at regulating emotions, we know that, and that helps self-control and resistance to conformity pressures. But is it? What do you think, Michelle? We're going to hold up the other end of the spectrum here. What do you think, that we are better at controlling our desires, or do you think are we 100% better?
I think our motivations are all different. I'll give you the example that came up for me when you were talking about this. Is you brought up the adolescence. When my daughter, we moved from Glendale to Malibu. In Glendale, all the moms drove minivans. It was super cool. And I had one. We moved to Malibu, and my daughter wanted me to park like a million miles away from school, and nobody was allowed. She just drove me crazy about getting rid of that minivan, to the point where I did. But that was a money decision I made. But it was based on my desire to. First, I tried to talk her into the minivan was cool, but she wasn't buying it. So, I bought a different car. And, you know, so I definitely was succumbing to the peer pressure and her pressure, but it was motivated by the fact that I wanted to make her happy. You know, I'm a big nurturer person.
That's a big difference.
But different people have different motivations and might make different decisions. I don't know, but
that's true. If you bought a different car because of the other ladies in Malibu. I know Malibu well, so it's kind of, we'll talk after.
It's a nice car. No minivans.
Yes, and, you know, there's a overstated elegance. I don't know what to say about Malibu. But the bottom line is, yes, if you're doing it because of your daughter, that shows that's a different motivation. I still succumbed
to pressure. I wasn't really ready to get rid of
daughter pressure.
Yeah.
But it's huge for your daughter. I mean, like,
it was huge.
Seeing it from her point of view, I'm like, oh my God, like, thank you, Mom. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
It was worth it because it was so huge. Like, her embarrassment and her distress over it every day. Yeah, it made a big difference.
And it just sucks because that's like the town, the city we live in, and it's not really
and
that big.
And she was kind of new and the age, and you know.
Oh.
I want to give you a big hug for that one. I got it.
So this study, they asked 157 adults ages 18 to 80, and they randomly timed surveys via text message every 3 hours about what their decision making was and what they were doing. And they monitored their self-control over spontaneous desires. And we all have those throughout the day, just like constant thing. We're always making decisions. Yeah. When I was preparing for this show, I sit in the kitchen and I go through all my studies and try to write up the show. But the kitchen is dangerously close to the food. So I probably gain, I don't know what, because I'm continually doing that. So I have to say, wow, I can be quite tempted. The results showed when desires or temptations were experienced in the presence of others enacting that desire, that was the problem. So if you were alone, you're better able to resist, unless you're in the kitchen. But if you're with other people, it's really difficult to resist. But if you go into a coffee shop alone and you're trying to resist buying, let's say, a latte for either caloric or money reasons, then you're probably going to have a much easier time saying no.
Yeah, I love that. It's also making me think, it's kind of this groupthink thing, but it could work in your favor. If all your friends are investing or, doing certain things, you could get kind of sucked into that a little bit more too.
Good habits.
It could be that it's harder to say no, but... Excellent
point, because I went to a school where no one in my family had gone to college, but I would say a good third of my high school went to college. Like a lot of people went to college. So that... I was just normal. I just wanted to go. Like, that's exactly what I wanted to do. All my friends wanted to go to college. So, yes, you're exactly right. Sometimes, and I never thought about that that was a big piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, it's interesting. It works both ways.
It does.
And it's like how you talked about the environment that we're in, too, where that environment is shaping how you're going to move.
Right.
I mean, we're in LA, like I said, everybody's out here for a big dream. So you have to go after your big dream too, you know?
Yeah. Which actually was always appealing to me about LA. Like, I moved away and lived a lot of places, but I felt like this was a place of possibility for those big dreams, even though it
I
can
love that.
take a dark turn sometimes with the way people act, but yeah. So.
No, I love that, because having that possibility gives us hope and it can move us forward. So that's not a bad thing. So there's good news for us. Middle-aged and older adults were better at controlling their desires than young adults. But bad news is not completely. Like, they still can succumb to problems, but they're just better at it. Younger adults, sorry, Brian, are less successful at regulating desires when others are around.
My friends literally text me and be like, you want to go out to eat? Okay. As I'm trying to cook at home, and
that's how it works.
Cave.
According to my daughter, cooking at home is just as expensive as going out, because food is expensive in the grocery store now. So.
You know what? I used to think that.
I don't know if it's an excuse or a reality.
It's not real.
Yeah, okay. It depends where you're shopping.
Exactly. It depends where you're shopping and where you're going out. Like, if you're shopping at the most expensive exclusive grocery store, where or the exclusive butcher, but then you go to McDonald's, they probably are somewhat comparable, but So, one thing about this study was interesting to me, because it's brought up something called the Hawthorne Effect, or observer bias in research, where the Hawthorne Effect holds that that studies basically do teach us something new about behavior, about, whatever we're studying. But whatever we're studying changes in response to being observed. And this is held in every part of research. It isn't just behavioral research. So this is one of these mysterious effects, which we call observer bias. And here in this study, we may be that people are actually holding back on impulsive actions because they know someone's observing. What was more interesting, though, is it went across age groups. So we can say that, everyone knew they were being observed. So the younger people still were not as good at holding back, and et cetera, et cetera. But it also, observer bias plays the other way, because if you do have friends who are saying, let's go to dinner, or let's invest in this fund, let's all do that, it might tilt your behavior in those directions.
Super interesting.
Okay, this is one I was really curious about, you guys. Would you rather work somewhere you love or have more flexibility, like be able to live where you like or work only when you felt like it. What do you think, Michelle?
Well, I started my company with the idea of helping people, find work they love, create work they love. So I'm a little biased, I think.
You're a love
that's
person.
Really important. I think what you do, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, every day for years and years and years has to be something that you at least care about. I mean, that you find somewhat satisfying or fulfilling or interesting or whatever it is, creative, whatever you need. So yeah, I'm
You're a love
already
person.
biased.
Okay. Right on. And I forgot to say, assuming the good financial compensation across the board. Like this is holding for salary. What is your preference?
Yeah, that's probably the trickier part.
It is
There's so many
tricky.
people who have something they love, but they can't actually make a great living doing it.
I think that can be tough. Brian, what about you? Would you work somewhere you love, or would you rather have more flexibility, do the things you want, like be able to live where you want, those types of things?
Ideally, I would want to do something I love that I can do the flexibility.
Well,
work.
yes.
Okay, sorry. I want my cake and I want to eat it too.
Yes.
But I think if I'm passionate
And be
about
thin.
something, I would rather invest my time into just working into that thing that I love, because it wouldn't feel like work. I would want it to be feeling like I'm just having fun, like I'm enjoying this, So I don't care if I'm working a lot, If I'm having a good time and doing what I love, I think it would make me happy, And if I'm getting paid enough to be able to do it, then yes, I would want to do what makes me happiest.
Yeah, to me, that's the ideal. You get paid what you want or need, and you're doing something you love.
Well, this is a study done by Wiley Workplace Intelligence. And Wiley is kind of an interesting, they're a publisher, an author. They publish tests. I mean, they do a great deal, especially in the psychology space and in the career space. And they publish a test for career called the DISC test.
Sure.
Do you know the DISC test? It is used a lot in corporate spaces. They look at 4 personality, workplace intelligence dimensions, which is dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. That's what DISC stands for. But it's not, I don't think it's widely used in psychology, even in career testing, because I've done career testing and studied that, and we certainly learned about the DISC, but it isn't like the first go-to. But it's an interesting one. It is used a lot in corporate spaces. And they basically were looking at the emotional paycheck, which is workplace culture. Do you love or hate it? That's kind of the workplace culture. Is this a place that you can really thrive, or is it one you want to hide? Flexibility, which are the things we talked about, location, and perks, which oddly enough, that we like our perks, but wasn't up there as much. But anyway, we'll talk about that. They surveyed 2,013 people in the United States. They published it on everythingdisc.com. So I usually try to go to these studies that are more scientific, but this is a pretty reputable place, and I thought this was a pretty interesting study nonetheless. The results were varied. So people 35 to 44, which is are millennials. They're a little older than you are, Brian. They're not in the bubble that we'll talk about. But they said work culture is more important than flexibility for the most part. They'd rather have love. 32% want a positive work culture, and 22% wanted flexibility. And these were the top 2 preferences. People 55 to 64, of which I'm in that group, the 40% prefer positive work culture, going to a place they love, and 22% preferred flexibility. So what we started to see is as people got older, people wanted more and more to work in a place they really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And I have a little theory about this, because things flip when they evaluated Gen Z. So our 18 to 24-year-olds, actually 34%, or that was their top, was flexibility. 34% wanted flexibility. again, 22% wanted a workplace culture. So they do like that. About 1 in 5 do. But if you had about 1/3 of them would rather have the flexibility. And then personal time off was 1 in 5 or 19%.
Interesting. Very interesting.
What do you think? I have a theory. I don't know if I'm right, but
Well, I'm thinking of my daughter, who's Gen Z, and flexibility is definitely the thing that's on her mind. You know, she gets very worried about the 5-day a week, 9 to 5. Like she wants to be either, you know, something that has more flexibility. And she works. She's a hard worker, and she's not like afraid of work or anything. But she also wants, I think her generation, at least her as an example, they're worried about missing out on life. So you want to mix up work but you don't want to not see your friends. You don't want to, you know, not have your hobbies or go to the gym or whatever it is. So there's this big, almost fear around being too, you know, working too much. Whether it could be brilliant, it could be problematic, I don't know. I mean, it's different than my generation coming up, but
I have to agree with you. I think that is very much what's going on in the culture today, is that we're seeing that sort of leaning toward experience, as Brian is nodding. You think that is true?
Yeah, because I'm constantly at work. I'm a paralegal. So at work, I'm like always trying to be like, hurry up, let's get the job done. I want to leave early. I want to try to make it to the beach. Or I'm like, can we leave early on Friday? Or I'm constantly trying to leave early. So I understand.
yeah.
I'll tell you just a little insight. He said, he goes, there's nothing to do at work. There's nothing to do. I'm so bored. And I'm like, well, can't you just figure out something to do? Like, I was thinking about when my workspaces, there's always work. There's always stuff to do. You can file, you can do this. And he's like, what?
I just want to go to the beach. And I think that's what everybody is on right now.
Oh, that's so funny.
We just want to live life.
Well, I also think my generation was more about kill yourself at the beginning, work any hours they ask you to work, do whatever they want, and then you'll get promoted, or somehow it's going to magically get better later, you know, and then you'll live your life.
They pull out the rug.
I don't think your generation, either it's a different view of the world. Like, you know, who knows how much time there is, or who knows, you know, it seems like people want to make sure that they're living life now and not just later.
They saw the rug pulled out from our generation. Like, so many people had jobs where they were fired when they were 40, 50, 60. Yeah. They had their retirements taken away. They saw so much pain that happened in these, and they see the rich getting much, much, much richer, and then the poor really struggling. And so I think you're seeing a cultural shift that's happening.
And I think it could be a healthy shift.
Yeah, because I've noticed a lot of younger people are also demanding that the job now is doing what they want instead of they doing what the job wants. I think that's kind of the mindset that's happening, which I'm like, I don't know how great that is.
Yeah, that one
I think that is problematic too. You know, like one day we'll talk about all my peeves that are on TikTok, like quiet quitting. Yeah. I'm like, why don't you real quit? Because what is that?
What is that?
I don't know. Dreaming about quitting, I did that too, but didn't have a name and it didn't get me anywhere.
God. So what we see though could be just an age cohort effect. That may just be it too, because maybe when we were younger, we had these jobs that didn't mean as much to us, and we weren't really doing our life's passion. So when I finally could do therapy like full time, I was so excited about it, and it was really interesting. I could go into my career progression, but what I really wanted to go a particular direction, and when I saw what therapy was and the magic, and that you never stop learning and you're always, I just was sold, this is what I wanted to do. So, I wanted to do something I loved. I wanted my workplace culture. Like, I love when I love going into work. Yeah. Like then you go in, and I've had days when I wake up and I feel excited. Yeah. And I love that.
And I think the culture thing, I think for some of the younger people, they haven't necessarily been in a company with a great culture. Right. Like, it can kind of change your mind if, where you're going to work every day does have this great culture and you feel great there, and they're, that's one thing I think when you don't have a lot of work experience yet, you might not really know what that means. So flexibility sounds great because you understand that, but...
Yeah.
Like, I interned when I first moved here to LA in 2015 at a fashion PR firm, and I loved it. Yeah, it's unpaid and it sucks, but I had that love for it that I didn't care. Like, I just loved being there and going to work every day. You know, it definitely was not good financially. Yeah. But I mean, I got the experience and I had the perks. Like, and they also took very good care of me, where I was getting side jobs on weekends to actually get money, you know? Yeah. So that made it amazing. And I was putting in work for that, you know? Yeah. So there was a shift, I guess I would say, within the last few years, even for me.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I think my daughter found something like that too, where she was like, oh my gosh, going to work is like, these people are amazing. You know, they bring us lunch. I mean, it was just cool, little perks. And all of a sudden you're like, I like going to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. Why does lunch work so well?
That's food.
But what we saw in this study was a trend upward, that as you got older, culture became, and doing what you loved and really enjoying going to work became more important to people.
And don't you think that's because you've had a lot of years maybe of not having a great culture, and then it becomes more important because you've sort of sacrificed
that's it. Maybe that's it. I think also we realize that work is a big part of our lives. It's not like we're just, we were talking before about this FIRE, you know, first in, retire early, whatever that
financial independence, retire early.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I didn't even get it right earlier.
So I apologize.
I thought people were getting fired. So.
No, I mean,
glad you
didn't even think of that. Yeah, but you know, financial independence, retire early, yes, and so but they put their money all toward retirement. That's why I think I thought it was first in. But but a lot of the people who are in that movement suffer a lot because they're doing something good in my mind, which is to delay gratification. But you can delay it too much, and you can actually put off so much gratification that you have a kind of a miserable life for a while.
Yeah.
So it's good when you enjoy going into work because then it's going to be helpful to you. You know, Brian and I went to a workshop. There's a book called Well at Work. We went to see this, the author. And she talked about an equation that really resonated with me, which is that, you know, when we talk about career testing, we're talking about person-environment fit. So that's, you know, you try to take care of that. What person fits into what environment? But once you're there, the individual job matters.
Right.
And the job might be, the equation was money times fun over hassles. So it's like divided by hassles. So if you have lots of fun, that might compensate for less money.
Yeah.
And if you have very few hassles, that's going to compensate.
Yeah.
So flexibility would fit into the hassle department. The fun would fit into the love department here, dead workplace culture. And, you know, of course, the money's always a piece because we have to survive.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. I love that. They do say that while money is an incentive, you know, you were talking about the perks. It's not the biggest incentive, actually. So, like throwing a raise at somebody in a bad culture with some other negatives and sometimes people do want the flexibility more than they want the money. So money isn't always the answer to making people happy at work.
In fact, so this is going back into a graduate school first year, but yeah, there's one of the original studies done in corporate world. I think it was maybe in the 30s. And this was done with the telephone company at the time, I think. And what they were doing was they wanted to improve the performance, I believe, of the operators and whatnot. So they wanted to see what's the best thing to do to get better performance. And they were seeing if, you know, one group they gave raises to for performance and one they gave praise. And you can guess which one did better.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Which was praise, of course, for those who might be guessing. Yeah,
and I think that's, you know, talk about culture where people are appreciated and they feel good at work. That's actually huge. And that's a cultural shift. That didn't used to happen in my day. You didn't get
I used to work at a luxury designer store that I hated. I hated worse than the military. Like, I hated going because it was such a toxic environment to work there. Yeah. With the employees, honestly.
Nobody appreciated you.
It was just crazy. Like, it's just toxic. just toxic that I was just like, I would be miserable driving to work.
So I knew Brian at this time, and I have to say, I'd never seen you look worse was during that time.
Yeah,
and I felt very bad because, it seemed like a good opportunity.
And that was good. I could have done amazing and made so much money.
He left working for me to go work for that place.
Oh, wow.
And then I said, I'm coming back because no, I can't do this.
Yeah. I think that's one of the best things to come out of COVID, actually, is the companies had to get competitive on culture because they needed people, and people had a lot of opportunity, and to make themselves attractive, they had to offer a better culture. That's what people were looking for. So
excellent.
That's true, though. Yeah.
So question for you guys, given a choice between culture and money, what do you think most people choose? So the overall.
Damn. I'm going to have to say money.
Okay.
I'm going to
Sadly.
say money, too, although misguided, but I'm going to say I think people would think that.
Well, in the group overall, this was all the respondents, 73% said a positive workplace culture.
Wow.
73%.
Shuck.
27% said working for a company that pays well.
Wow. Okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to hear that for
I know.
sure.
It's good news.
Yeah.
So, people made fun of Google and Facebook and all those for doing those big campuses and putting bouncy balls. I mean, maybe they made some mistakes, but they were going for workplace culture, which, there's some brilliance in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I can take my dog to work right now. So it's like any other job, I have to make sure that I can bring her along.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, very cool.
Excellent. So now we're going to talk about millennials, late stage millennials. Brian, this is for you, and we have an expert here to help guide you through this morass. This was from a New York Times article called "It's Me. Hi, I'm the problem. I'm 33." I was so struck by this article. I think I read it like 4 times. It was something about it that really resonated with me. This is to meet the 1990 and 1991 babies, basically. She said this is a massive microgeneration that is going to be in lifelong competition for America's economic resources. And they're going to leave a trail of destruction in their wake, which I know is going to resonate with you, Brian, because you are 1992.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you are right. You were really part of this.
Yeah. Sorry, man, for what I've already done and what I will do.
So people born, well, you were like locusts coming up every 17 years, it's coming and doing some destruction. People born 1990 and 1991 make up the peak of America's population. And late stage millennials, they're the I think I pushed the wrong button there, so excuse me. It's like a person. I loved her imagery. It's like a person trying to squeeze into a too small sweater at every stage of life. So you're always competing for more space than you actually have. Like you're always going to be competing for everything that happens. Wedding venues, jobs, college applications, everything that comes along. Buying a house. You're competing with people in your age group that are going to be tougher than, say, previous generations that came before you. And she made the analogy that this will leave the sweater somewhat flabby and misshapen in its wake, which led me to question whether there's going to be left anything for Gen Z, because once all the locusts eat it up, will there be anything left? So in 2022, this group was 4.75 million for the 1990s and 4.74 for the 1991. So you can see how big this was. And today's 30 to 34-year-olds, Brian, is about 700,000 people larger than the 35 to 39-year-old group.
Wow.
Yeah, that is significant.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot. I had no idea that it was such a big bubble like that. That's so
You kind of want to go back 30 years and go, what was going on?
What were you guys doing?
Parents, they were busy.
I guess.
What was happening?
Yeah, what was happening?
Well, I don't know. What was going on in the 90s? Because that
Late
was
80s.
that. Oh, what? Music was good in the 80s, but it kind of got funky in the 90s. So people probably just said, let's go upstairs
I guess.
and make it happen.
That is
And,
really
there was a baby
interesting.
bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just guessing. So Yeah, we talked about actually in college enrollment, do you know this peaked in 2009? Community colleges that year had to turn away applicants. And I know this was true at Santa Monica Community College. I knew some people got turned away. And I'm like, how is that even possible?
Wow.
They said, like, we couldn't even get classes. So they said, we have to apply next year. I'm like, what? So the group graduated, moved to this group moved to metro areas, so that happened. They're competition for a limited supply of apartments. Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, San Antonio, Austin. We can go Chicago probably. I mean, just go down all the line of the big cities that got hit with this. And now they want houses. So some are starting to move to rural areas. So we're seeing massive influx in those particular areas. It used to be the median age for first-time home buyings typically in the 30s. It's higher in metro areas. And the demand for housing remains high. And older people are not moving. And they're living longer. Sorry. Really
No,
sorry.
I feel really guilty.
But
You need a house.
yeah. Sometimes that's the New York way to get an apartment. You just try to outlive someone. Isn't it, Gus? Gus is from New York City.
Yeah, it's expensive regardless, though.
So, I mean, and you know, it's just kind of a rough thing. So, but she talked about something kind of interesting. So, during the previous generation that had this problem was in the early 1960s, which I will say is when I was born. So I had to have immediate sympathy for Brian because sometimes I'm like, that's just what life is, like in my head. But maybe that's just what my life was. Because this tripped me up when she talked about this because it was true. The people who were born in the 60s, their adult years were in the 80s. We had the good music. And inflation spiked for several years around 12%. We're bitching about it being 4% now. Yeah. I mean, it was massive at that time. 30-year interest rates for home mortgages, it peaked at 18.6%. Yeah. 18%.
That's crazy to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, 1981. And that stayed high for a long time, too. Yeah. The 80s were pretty much that. And we had a punishing recession going on. This is what lost Jimmy Carter the election. Reagan got elected. I mean, it was very much in this, this new dawn. But things were rough economically throughout the 80s, especially the early 80s.
Right.
Was there a reason? Just like what was happening?
It was the oil crisis, but I don't remember.
Oh, yeah. And then also, I don't remember all the things. Yeah, there was certainly that. And then also here we had a aerospace problem that happened here. And so a lot of the people because I grew up in an area that had a lot of aerospace. McDonnell Douglas was there, and we built the space shuttle and all that. And I don't know why, but somehow that all went under. There were a lot of problems.
At that time. My mom, all the engineers lost their jobs. And Boston was a big engineering hub too. And I can't for the life of me. I just remember my mom telling me, because all her friends, she was talking about the engineers are all losing their jobs. I don't know what would be going on that now we need engineers so badly. I can't imagine a time when engineers couldn't work. But
it was, I mean, it was a weird time. I do remember I couldn't get a job anywhere. I just, I was working. Even when I graduated college, I couldn't get a job. I took a job in an elementary school as a teacher's aide. Yeah. And I worked at Disneyland doing Jungle Cruise. Oh, cool. Thank you. Those were my two jobs because I needed health insurance, and the Disney job gave me health insurance, and then the school job was, gave me a few hours extra a week, and so I did these things to try to,
That's interesting. I got my MBA because of that. I couldn't find a job either. I just figured I'll just go to graduate school.
There you go.
Wow. Yeah. How crazy.
It was a crazy time. I don't think about it very much. That's interesting to go back there. Yeah.
But I think that in some ways that can give hope for this generation,
for sure.
And that's what I really was thinking about. They called that group the peak boomer age, but I think there were some Gen Xers caught in that snare. But they were left with permanent economic scars, and compared to the rest of the generation, they now to this day have a heightened risk for homelessness. Wow. And this makes sense to me because I see people my age homeless. I mean, I see people living in campers, and I watch my own family members who are my age who struggle. So it's it's a tough thing. It's not always easy. And I don't blame them for their struggles, because I know that, it's just sometimes that's what life hands you. It's the curveball you aren't expecting. They compared that generation, the peak boomers, to a giant trying to fit into an extra small sweater, where the millennials are a giant trying to squeeze into a large sweater. So it's like you're a giant and you're still going to stretch out the sweater, but the boomers they really stretched out the sweater, and probably why a lot of people are kind of bitter about them, because they kind of went and clotted up everything. They were the previous generation of the locusts that just kind of hurt everything. But I think this, in some ways, I hope that we can go, oh, wait, someone came before me and had it just as hard, if not harder, and they got through.
That's an amazing way to look at it. To know that there's hope.
Yeah, it's a good reminder, too, because, there are just going to be economic cycles. There always have been, and there always will be. But when we're in them, we feel like, nobody's ever experienced this before. So it's kind of good to go back and see, review some of that and realize people do get through it. And, it's just part of your financial life. I think there are going to be downturns. So, do as well as you can and have, I guess, enough of a safety net to get you through the downturns, because they'll come around again.
That's a very interesting, because I often talk to people about developing an emotional safety net, but of course having just a physical safety net is so very important.
Yeah,
so.
It's hard. It's, goes against the peer pressure spending thing. Using your safety net.
But it's cool. I mean, at least we can look at it as a cycle, like you said, where it's like maybe we can plan ahead for it and stuff like that. Or like the generation that's going to be dealing with this, how we've dealt with this,
Yeah.
Try to make some changes to help, I guess.
Yeah, and if you can, I think it becomes an emotional exercise as much as anything, just being able to handle it. So I can give you a story. I probably said it on my podcast, but when 9/11 happened, my husband went into a complete panic and sold our entire stock portfolio. Like, he's just like, I can't have any stocks. They're all going to tank. It's going to be, horrible. We're going to lose everything. So I'll take it out, and then later, when things calm down, I'll put it back in. Well, of course, that never happened. And when I look back now, if we'd left that alone, we'd been saving pretty hard. It was a pretty decent little, portfolio. And poof, gone. And, you don't always put things back. You say you're going to, but life happens. And so that was a very emotional, somewhat irrational decision. So,
but I would also encourage you there. You talked about self-compassion, and that's certainly something I would consider, because you know what? We don't do things for bad reasons. We do things for good reasons.
That's very, very true.
And so he was doing it to save your money.
That is very true. That's a very good perspective.
So, even when we make those kinds of good reason decisions, they don't always work out. Sometimes something bad happens, and I don't think there's any way to know. I think, it's interesting, though, if he had left it in and stocks tanked, then he would, that would be a decision he'd regret. He'd go, I knew to take it out, and I didn't. And
which I guess, to your point, with money, you've got to forgive yourself for what you do, because you are guessing a lot of the time. And so some of the things are logical and you can do them and feel good about it, but there's going to be a lot of guesswork.
A lot of guesswork, and I also would say that don't give up, Brian. It'll if you can look at us and say, you can land on your feet. We could talk about the animal models. When they give up, that's when they do worse. Their immune systems drop. They stop taking choices, and they actually put up with more abuse when they give up. So actually being able to continue doing things even when you don't feel like them, and try hard and keep pushing forward, is really the way to go. It's really the survival way, and it really, in your body, will help you along the way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful to even just be in this room with you guys, honestly, because, some people don't get this knowledge. Some people don't get to even see somebody else that has gone through what they're going through and come out of it perfectly fine at the end,
Yeah. And I do think, with respect to there's going to be a lot of innovation that we can't even anticipate that's
you're
going to
right.
come from all of this. So the whole sweater idea, I get the analogy, but I think we can't sit here now and even imagine what life is going to be like and what new economies and new businesses and new housing situations and everything are going to emerge from this, because there's, when
the sweater gets too stretched out, you can wear a shawl.
Right.
And the shawl might be a whole lot better.
Yeah, you take all the yarn out and make something new. I don't know, but exactly. I just don't see it as being, like the sweater is all you've got.
Exactly. That's good. Well, that wraps up the show for today. That was really great. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. This was so much fun talking to you guys.
Are you kidding? I mean, you really brought an extra level of expertise and fun. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I loved it. Thank you so much.
That wraps up the show. A reminder to like, subscribe, give us 5 stars. Go to the YouTube page if you want to see the studies that we referred to. I actually give the links to all the studies on the YouTube page at youtube.com/Dr. Greg. If you have any questions or you'd like topics you'd like us to cover, hit me up on the socials at Ask Dr. Greg. A special thank you to Michelle Perkins, former CPA, but that knowledge goes far, because then became certified coach and CEO of Limit Free Life. May I say that website, limitfreelife.com, is extremely impressive.
Oh, thank you.
So I just got to give it to you there. And she is the host of the Money and You podcast with Michelle Perkins. Find her at limitfreelife.com. And where else can people find you? In Malibu.
You can find me in Malibu, and you can find me on LinkedIn for sure. And I think the website, podcasts, LinkedIn. I have an Instagram, but it's pretty sad. I'm a little embarrassed.
Well, thank you, everyone. This is Dr. Greg, Brian, and Michelle Perkins, and Gus, all bidding you farewell. Until next time, be present, be flexible, and be kind.